Hello, I'm Spencer Disher. I'm the finance chair at St. Mark's United Methodist Church, and I sit on the board here at the foundation.
And my name is Glenn Kinken. I am the Chief Operating Officer at the United Methodist Foundation, and I am also your conference treasurer. And we're here to talk to you about something that we love, which is the Finance Committee and the work of finances in the local church. Now, Spencer, when we look in the Book of Discipline, I got the notes here. It's paragraph 258.4 that outlines all the responsibilities of the Finance Committee. So responsibility for financial accountability, raising money to support the budget, creating a budget and submitting it to the church council for accountability and approval. I have a note here that this is not in the Book of Discipline, but I always put it down that the Finance Committee is not the purse string holder. They're responsible for holding the audit, for reporting to charge conference, the financial numbers, and especially related to the end of the year statistics, and they are committed to transparency about communicating with the church's money and making sure that the monthly remittance of apportionments happens. Now, in your experience on Finance Committee, how easy is all of that to do?
What we've been doing at St. Mark's is we actually have an online forum where we allow each of our ministries to input information as it relates to what it is that they're doing, are there any changes to what they're doing, and how they actually see themselves using the proceeds of the monies that we would potentially allocate. So we're ministry driven as it relates to developing our budget.
You know, I love that because a lot of times I teach with our Reynolds Academy for Ministry Management, teaching our pastors, but in conversations with finance committees and others, is reminding folks that the Finance Committee builds a budget because the budget is the fuel for ministry, and it needs to always be aligned with the church's mission, vision, and values. And it sounds like you all do that at St. Mark's really well. Another technique that I've also talked about is this idea of zero-based budgeting, where every committee starts at zero and then decides, what are we going to do this year that's going to have the greatest impact, the greatest involvement, and invite the greatest number of people into the life of our church? And those are the priorities that we're going to fund. And you guys do that through that online portal, which I think is a brilliant idea.
So let me just touch on that.
Yeah,
because, there's certainly the zero-based budget approach. And I would say that ours is more of a hybrid. And by that, I mean, in general, most of our ministries look to what they've done in the past and say, hey, look, do we see ourselves doing a little bit more or a little bit less? But there are other cases where a good example is our AV and streaming services that we provide, which has changed drastically since COVID, right? And so that's a ministry where we've looked at it and said, okay, we need to relook at this whole thing, perhaps combine it with other things we're doing, and we call it now our media ministry. And so that would be something where we would take a more zero-based, budget approach.
The zero-based budget across the board is very labor-intensive.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe every so often, maybe every 5 years, really look at all the committees over the course of a year like that. But what you all are doing is a little more nimble, a little easier to do, and you do it in smaller chunks.
Right.
So that sounds really good. So one of the other things that I have always heard people complain about with finance committees is that the Finance Committee sits there and crosses their arms and says no when it comes to spending money. And I've always believed that the Finance Committee is not the committee of no, they're the committee of possibilities. They build that budget, but then they have the responsibility to manage it and to figure out what is happening. So whether the Finance Committee meets on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, to really review the revenue and expenses or the sources and uses, whichever language your church uses with that, but to really make sure that the expenditures are in line with the ministry plan that the church council approved, and to question, and when they're not, to sort of figure out why is that the case, and then to also weigh that against the revenue. Now, on paper, that makes sense. However, it's a lot harder to do, isn't it, in practice?
Absolutely. We truly try to say, submit what you think you need for your budget, but be prudent about it. And then let's say you come to us and, for instance, we have a gospel extravaganza. How do we make what you're trying to do happen? Whether we have the resources internally through our own giving, or whether there are ways for us to look outside of that to bring other funds in.
So what I like about what you're saying, Spencer, is there's this collaborative nature between the ministry teams, the finance committee, trying to make sure that those plans happen, but trying to make sure that it's something that you all can afford at your church. But you're working in partnership with them so that you recommend a church council, which is, again, driven by the mission and vision and values of those ministry teams, so that you all are able to do what you want to do.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to just touch on the other point that you raised, and that's as we're going through the year. And so, fortunately, many of the ministries at our church are very cognizant and try to stay within budget. But there are times when I'll get a call and it's like, we do certain outreach ministries where we help different people who might have a challenging situation. And being, the spiritual acolytes that we are, we want to try to do something, but the budget says no. We actually have a line item within our budget, which we call programming ministries, which is kind of a catch-all. And that's that if there are things that are smaller, we don't need to go back to, and we actually have the hybrid administrative board. So church council, our administrative board kind of acts as the church council, and you're aware that there's some churches that are using this method of administering their church. And so we don't have to go back to the administrative board. We can go to the chair of that program and ministry and say, hey, look, the outreach ministry is at their cap. They would like to, expend $200 to help with this electric bill for someone. Or another ministry might say, we didn't see this coming, but there's this great opportunity to match a grant or something. And so that ministry has a generous line item for it to allow us to capture those things. So we find ourselves not often having to say no. And usually, once again, we'll try to work with that ministry to handle whatever it is. And so far, that's worked out very well.
So one of the things that finance does is after a finance committee sets the budget budget goes to the church council, whether it's the one board model, the old council on ministries, administrative council model, or the one church council model. It goes to that body. That body approves it. And at that point, finance really is just responsible for measuring how we're doing throughout the year. And if there are those things that come up, trying to help unwind and figure out, or unravel, I guess is the phrase, and figure out what is really going on with the money. But let's say, for example, that there were some unforeseen expenses that had to be paid. You got to put a new roof on. Or there was the church vehicle, the church bus broke down. Or worse, the giving drops off for some reason, and finance, in evaluating this, all of a sudden realizes we may need to make an adjustment to the budget. My understanding has always been that at that point, finance tries to come up with a solution, but then because it might change how the budget works, they can't just make that unilateral. They take that to the church council and say, folks, the ox is in the ditch. We need to make some changes. And here's what we recommend.
Right. So, absolutely. So we have an older church building, and so
many of us do, right? Many of us do,
absolutely. And so we truly don't know what can happen in any given year. We unfortunately had to replace a roof twice within a span that we should have not had to. Okay.
Right.
And so it was an unexpected expense, but we had to do it. So for us, we're fortunate. We have a balance sheet. And so anytime we're spending more than, for us, anytime we spend more than $2,500, it's a capitalized expenditure. And so what I say to the trustees, so the trustees have a budgeted line item to handle repairs and so forth. But within the scope of our church, I can blow through that if I had to do the roof or if I had to do the parking lot or whatever.
If you can get a roof for $2,500, I want to get your connection.
Right. But that line item,
Right.
what I'm getting at is, let's say it's $20,000
Right.
hypothetically.
Okay.
So they can't do a roof for $20,000. So they will have to come back to the board, and we ask for due diligence to be done. So anything that's over that $2,500 amount, or anything that they're going to have to come above that line item, whatever that line item is, they're going to have to come back to the administrative board and ask, okay, guys, we got to do this. Here are the 3 quotes we have, and they're going to more than likely, we're going to do that because we have to.
Right.
So for us, we're fortunate. We happen to have a balance sheet that allows us to handle those things as they come up. But as you say, there's no way to budget for that. And so I would say that probably every 3 years or so, there's something that comes along. The trustees have warned me that the boiler it's any day we're going to have.
And it's wintertime, so you know that it's not going to happen in August.
Exactly, and so but we'd like to keep going because so we are continuing to use that particular equipment. There may be a point where we say, okay, you know what, let's not take the risk and let's go ahead and change it.
Right.
Instead of changing it on a New Year's Eve or something like that. So, good question. That's kind of how we've been handling it, and we're fortunate we have the resources to do that.
Good. Well, one of the other responsibilities besides budget prep and budget management is a financial audit and reporting to the congregation. Now, a lot of people when they hear the word audit, they sort of cinch up because they think of an IRS audit. But really, what an audit does is it provides an opportunity for an outside source to come in and look at the church's books and to make sure that the money is A, all accounted for, B, spent the way the donors intended, and it's being spent wisely insofar as there's procedures to prevent fraud. So what it really begins to ensure people that the church's money is safe and secure. As a friend of mine once told me, he said, you always think of church money as other people's money or as God's money. And so we always want to make sure that we're really spot on with that. The General Council on Finance Administration has a booklet called the Local Church Audit Guide. And it's a long booklet, and so it helps finance committees.
I just happened to.
You have one with you. Good. It helps finance committees figure out exactly how to conduct this audit. So you can bring in an accounting firm to serve as your auditor. You may have someone in your church that does audit work that will come and do it for you. But if you have neither of those, or it's too expensive for your church to prove, that Local Church Audit Guide spells things out so that the finance committee makes sure the work is done and then can report to the local church and say, folks, just wanted to let you know your money is well spent, well secured, and we have all the tools in place to make sure everything is done just as we want it to.
Sure. We've done both internal, where we've used church members that are not part of the finance committee in any shape, form, or fashion.
Right.
They're not related to them as per the discipline. And so we've also gone outside. We had used a number something like $500,000, but I think that the audit guide that you mentioned, it suggests that anywhere above $300,000 or $400,000 is just suggested that you consider going outside. I also, but the finance committee has taken the view that we're not looking for a CPA audit as perhaps a public entity would, but to your point, we're looking for outside view to make sure that we've been good stewards with the church's money. Strategically, as part of our policy, we, no matter what, if we've been doing it internally with members from in the church, we have said that every 3 years we will go out to an outside firm. And I think that's very important, that somewhere along the lines you bring in an outside firm. And I say that because, and I would also suggest, if it's possible, to use a firm that is doing other churches in, if possible, other United Methodist churches, because then they're familiar with our discipline. It just so happens that we do, and I look at it not just as making sure and giving comfort to our church membership that we're being good stewards, but it also allows us to learn, well, what are the latest things that we should be aware of? And so an entity that's from the outside that's looking at what's happened at other churches might say to you, I know you trust your counters, which we do, we truly do, but you might want to, for a very small fee, increase your liability from $10,000 to $50,000 or something like that. And that might cost me another $50, to have that insurance against something that might happen fraudulently. What's that?
Now, something you said, you talked about your counters. So I want to talk about one of the responsibilities of the finance committee is managing relationships. And the relationships I'm talking about is the relationships of the finance chair, the treasurer, and then who counts the money on Sunday mornings and who records all of it. So one of the things that we know the Book of Discipline says is that the finance chair and the treasurer should not be related in the same household. And they say that, and also the people that count money on Sundays, that they should not be related either. So at least two unrelated people should count and verify all the offerings and what comes in the mail, so that the financial secretary or the treasurer can prepare the deposits. So those are important things for us to always remember, and figuring out how to get there. And I know getting volunteers in church is hard, and sometimes you think, well, if we do that every Sunday, we'll need at least 8 volunteers. Well, there are ways that you can do that. Just make sure that the two people that count aren't related, right?
Right.
Now, what about bonding?
Yeah. So once again, we have an umbrella policy that provides for the bonding of our officers, including our counters. But just to touch on a little bit of the strategies. One is that, once again, this came from the pandemic, is online giving. And so this almost removes a lot of the risk of what happened to that dollar, trying to tie out, because some of it is not just the headache of, some of it is not just the risk, if you will, but it's just the headache of the deposit says such and such and 50 cents, and my counters are saying it's, less, it's 50 cents less, and my counters take their job seriously. Okay?
Right.
So the last thing I want to do is say, well, you guys are wrong, but okay.
Somewhere there's a $50 missing. We got to find it, right?
Exactly.
Right.
So where I'm going with this is just that I think that churches need to seriously consider online giving. I think that going back to just the whole budgeting piece, it's important that the church can have a better picture if we have what's the word I'm looking for, where it's standardized giving every
a recurring gift.
Recurring gifts,
right?
Yes,
Absolutely.
So having online reoccurring gifts, and if you get them in ACH, there's no credit card fees to it. That's where I'd love to take the whole church.
Right, and now ACH is something you do with your bank, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So ACH, as opposed to credit cards. So a lot of the online platforms allow you to use credit cards, and many of them allow you to do ACH. If you can get your membership to do the ACH, you save on the credit card fees.
And those credit card fees, as I remember, it's usually something like 3% of the total gift plus a transaction fee of $1 or $1.50. It varies from platform to platform.
Exactly. But I think that it's important to So what I would be saying to my potential counters is, well, the good news is that you don't have to count every dollar that's coming into the church. Okay, you're really in our church, you're really only having to count 25% of it. Almost 75% of our giving is online or through text.
Well, that's a good thing. That's good.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Over the years, I've watched the collection plates as they pass, and fewer people are putting things in. But they're really assured. They tell me when I was their pastor, plate passed me by, but I give online. Make sure that I know they give online, which is interesting because I just, in the moment, I don't know.
Right.
But one of the things that's in the book of discipline, and a lot of people don't believe it's there, but is that the pastor has the right and the responsibility to look at the giving records.
Yes.
Now, a lot of people get squeamish about that. What I've always tried to help people understand with that is, one, I'm looking at the bigger picture, but every once in a while you sense there's a spiritual issue going on. And when you look at the giving records as a pastor, you're looking at that and you're starting to see that there's something going on in the lives of people. So people that have all of a sudden started giving when they haven't given in the past, something is happening within them. Or if they've been giving in the past and they're no longer giving, something is happening in their lives. And that's an opportunity for us as pastors to go and to check in and say, what has happened to you on either end of that? So you have come alive. Tell me more.
Yep.
Or something seems to be happening. Is everything okay?
Right.
And so really, it doesn't become a barrier to ministry. It becomes an indicator for us.
I provide a lot of data where I have stripped of names. So I can say, here's what your top 20 givers have done over the last 3 years. And I can say, you know what? These 3 people you need to have a conversation with. Okay, giving is down. So in my particular case, I do have the situation where there's a little bit of pushback, but at the same time...
It's in every church.
Okay.
It's in every church.
Okay. But they've been very receptive to me being able to slice and dice, and I've kind of enjoyed it because to a certain extent, I don't even really want... I think subconsciously, sometimes you're going to make a judgment, and I don't want to get into judgment. Okay?
Right.
If there's somebody that's in a brand new Mercedes, and yet I don't see it in the plate, I don't want to make that judgment. So I try to look at the information to say, at our top givers, our middle givers, the number of givers, is giving going down for particular groups. A good example, we did a fundraiser for our church. It was for the kitchen. Exciting. It was a lot of excitement. But we noticed that the giving kind of dipped. So the fundraising did very well, and we enjoyed it, and we're all very happy and celebrated it. But at the same time, I was able to discern that there was actually some movement of giving from, say, our tithes and offering slot to the fundraiser slot. And so those are kind of things that the finance committee and the ministry needs to know, so that when we say, let's do this, we realize how it might impact overall our finances.
Look at the data. Data always tells a story. One of the things that we use a lot at the foundation, we use this phrase, we learned it from Royce Reynolds, is if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so data tells us a lot of stuff. So friends, thank you so much for taking time to listen to the two of us talk about something that we enjoy, which is the finance committee of the church and how that money becomes a fuel for ministry. A couple of resources that I want to lift up to you is if you go to the conference website and you go on the conference treasurer's page, you'll have all kinds of information and forms that relate to the finance committee, health and benefits, and pensions. If you go to the foundation's website, you'll see information on how to build a budget, on a gift acceptance policy, records retention, those kinds of things that are important. And then the General Counsel on Finance and Administration, GCFNA, if you go to their website, they have resources that cover the local church audit guide to finance committees to right-sizing your budget. So if your church has had years of large budgets, but now all of a sudden the giving is off, you need to adjust your budget. It comes with a game plan to help you do that. And then obviously you can go to WestPath for information on our pension plans. Discipleship Ministries has a set of guidelines for all of our church committees, but especially for the finance committee. And so we commend those to you for your enjoyment and your perusal. And as always, if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at the conference or at the foundation. In both cases, we're willing to help. And I'm thankful for you, my friend.
Well, I enjoyed this.
Yeah.
It was good having the chance to chat about some of, at a 30,000 foot level and some of the details.
Yep, absolutely.
Yep.